Welcome to BAM, Badass Moms with Lori and Jenny. We are moms on a mission to share women's stories about life, fitness, aging, relationships, travel, and much more. Hello, friends, and thanks for listening. I just wanted to take a second to give you a quick reminder about subscribing to the show. If you have not already, just take a moment and do so. This will make sure that you never miss a daily bite or an upcoming episode. And in addition to that, if you have a few extra moments and like to drop us a review, we'd really appreciate it. And there's also a sponsor of the show located at the bottom of all of our episodes. Once again, thank you for listening. Thank you for being badass. Hello, friends, and thanks for joining us on another episode of The BAM with Lori and Jenny. Today, we had the pleasure of interviewing Lindsey, who is the CEO and founder of Jetset World Travel. We talked about her starting her travel agency at a young age and growing it to what it is today. Lindsey also discussed the challenges of the COVID-19 pandemic hitting as she was pregnant with her first child and how she and her husband/business partner kept the company afloat. Lindsey talks about work-life balance challenges as a working mom and her experiences with imposter syndrome. Such an exciting episode. Lindsey, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me, Lori and Jenny. I'm excited to be here. I know this is going to be a great conversation.
Yes,
Absolutely.
We're excited. Well, and we were just talking before we hit record that we are in Colorado. And Lindsey, you're in Atlanta?
I am.
Georgia? Okay. And we had a massive snowstorm. So that impacts Lindsey's business. So we'll talk a little bit about that too, like how you have to adjust on the fly.
Totally. Anytime you see a weather-related, a strike, a government shutdown, any of those things, just think of the travel agents.
Right.
They are going through
COVID,
something.
did you hear that thing, COVID? I'm sure that had a little effect.
That little blip on the radar that was a world pandemic. Quite the event.
It looks like you guys grew significantly. So why don't we start there?
Yeah.
So did you tell us about how you started your company, what happened during COVID and all the things?
Yeah.
Yes, I'm so happy to dive into that conversation because so much of this is linked to my journey to motherhood as well. So for your listeners, obviously the common thread here is that we're all moms. And what does that look like, especially as a strong entrepreneurial, independent woman, and how that just rocks your world. So I started my business. I actually accidentally walked into a travel agency for a brochure and I walked out with the job. So I was 19 years old. I started learning the ropes. I looked around and realized there weren't a lot of other 19-year-olds that were in the travel agent industry. And I just started seeing ways that I could innovate and do it better and bring a fresh perspective to the clients, to the end travelers, as well as to fellow travel advisors. So I started building this company around that. We are officially 10 years old as of this year.
Yay. Congratulations.
Yeah, thank you. It has been a really fun, wild ride. With the highlight of that ride being the fact that you guys just touched on, right? A world pandemic shook us to the core, as it did so many others in so many other industries. But when flights are grounded, it's very hard to plan travel. So. Yeah. So we had quite the interruption. Interestingly enough, that interruption occurred March of 2020 when I was 5 months pregnant with my first child. So all of that happened at the same time that you're having this, real reckoning of how, for me, I had linked my identity to success and then the identity shift that occurs when you become a mom, right? So much of my journey had to do with what it looked like to kind of peel back the layers of who am I at my core and who do I want to show up as, especially to this little girl that I get to become a model for.
Yeah, that's awesome. So I want to go even further back. So let's talk about travel. And I am a huge travel lover. I know Jenny is also. And so when did your love of travel spark? Was it a trip? Was it, some family trip? Was it an independent, backpacking trip? I'm really curious, where that passion started.
Yeah, it's really funny. I grew up in a very entrepreneurial family. And for a very short stint of time, a couple of years when I was probably 6 to 8 years old, my parents owned a cruise agency. My dad was trying to plan a cruise. He couldn't get anyone to call him back. And he said, you know what? I'm going to go on this cruise. I'm going to come back. I'm going to open a shop that helps people plan cruises. And so they did that for a couple of years. And I grew up cruising. I had no idea that it was not normal. That was not everyone's family vacation. And I was platinum Royal Caribbean, but at the time I was 13. I had no idea that wasn't normal, to the point, you guys, this is very funny now. I didn't think you could travel any other way. I didn't know people flew and stayed in places. I thought they just cruised there. Yeah. So that was my normal.
Oh my gosh, I love it. So did you have any, I have to ask because I've been on one cruise and it was years ago and we did have a blast, but I have not gone on another one because you hear all the horror stories, right? Like of everybody on the boat getting sick. Have you ever had an incident with all those cruises you've done?
Oh my gosh. Luckily, I have not myself. And now, nowadays cruising is not my preferred way of travel. It's more nostalgia for me because it's how I grew up. But I will tell you, I grew up doing kind of larger cruise experiences and had no idea there were these smaller yacht style cruises. So Jenny, if you're wanting to cruise on them again and you're a little concerned about crowds, those will blow your mind. Like a floating Four Seasons. That was Seabourn for me was a game changer.
That's awesome. And I've heard, what's the one? It's Viking. I've heard Viking river cruises are amazing. So yeah, I'm like, okay, I can open my mind to that.
Yes. Okay. So cruising, you kind of obviously got, your world got opened up to seeing different places. And so as you got older, was that kind of already just in you where you're like, I want to help other people get to see all these amazing places in the world? How do I do that? Like, what can I do to contribute to, showing people there's more outside of their own, comfort zone?
I quickly learned that when I walked into that agency at 19 and got offered a job. And it was funny, I was standing in the agency going, well, who sells travel for a living? And they're like, hello, you're in a travel agency. And most people don't realize that's still a viable profession. And as I got into it, I really realized that the true honor is we're getting to steward these memories, right? Like people are coming to us and saying, hey, I've got this idea in the back of my head and I don't want to get it wrong. How can I make sure that this is an unforgettable experience? So yes, exactly what you just asked. We're making sure that those things come to life in really special ways.
Well, Lindsey, it's really interesting you say that, with the world of like making travel so accessible at our fingertips, like we can go and plan our own trips, but it's overwhelming, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we have a trip coming up to Italy and we recently were lucky enough to go to New Zealand and Fiji and all this fun stuff. But, I love planning, but a lot of people don't, right? Mm-hmm. And even if you do, it gets overwhelming, especially where there's so many accommodations and so many places to go and see and such a limited amount of time we have with our travel. It's hard to just like narrow it down. So I'm assuming you've really taken that stress off people's shoulders when they come to you and say, I want to do this. And these are the memories I want to have. Then you guys take over, right?
Exactly. And for some people, maybe just a run-of-the-mill trip is okay to plan on your own. But if it's a really milestone event, especially, and we have clients who run the gamut, who say, we just want to do the big trips through you. We like planning ourselves. And then others who say, all right, now I'm addicted. I never want to have to spend another minute researching my own vacations. So it depends on kind of the client preference, because I'm with you. I enjoy planning, right? Yeah. Obviously, it's what I did for a living.
It's good you're in this business.
Role. Yes. But we have kind of a mix of those individuals who enjoy it or who just want to say hands off. I want someone else to deal with it. But I think what's interesting even for those who enjoy it, one, you don't know what you don't know. And so you might overlook something when you're researching. You're kind of the closest to the source of who you are and what you like, which sometimes means you overlook how to match yourself with that particular destination or hotel type or cruise type. So having kind of an unbiased third party who's getting to know you, your partner, your kids, everyone that's traveling, and saying, all right, this is going to be a home run for everyone involved. And then on the flip side, because we live, eat, and breathe travel, we're making connections through all of those hotels, cruise lines, tour companies. And so if you're going to, the St. Regis, and we've recently had dinner with the GM from 3 of their properties, and you're going to several of them throughout Europe, like we can instantly make the connections that we've been forming on the back end to say, make sure you're going to take care of this client, right? Like they're coming in, by the way, they're allergic to this particular, type of amenity. So make sure they don't have that. Make sure they have red wine waiting for them. It's their favorite, whatever it is that kind of customizes it and elevates it.
Yeah. The special touch. I love that. So I'm totally the opposite. I do not like to plan. I'm like, just tell me where to be. And here's the things I like to do. And I'm good just showing up and going along for the ride. So you're speaking my language. And we might be jumping ahead a little bit, but I'm super curious because you started this, 10 years ago, and technology has changed so significantly, not even just like people able to plan their own trips, but even how you market to people, how you find your clients. How has that impacted your business, and what do you like about it, not like about it, all that kind of stuff?
It's a good question because so we specialize in 4 and 5-star vacations, and that kind of puts it more in the luxury sector, which means that oftentimes our absolute best marketing is referrals. It's individuals coming back from their trip, telling their friends, hey, I use this travel advisor. They got it so right. I want to make sure you never get your trip wrong either. And so you got to call her next time. Yeah. So a lot of that hasn't changed. I will say as the company's grown and we've got about 80 team members now. We landed on the Inc. 5000 list last year. So we're growing really thoughtfully and with such cool momentum. Now, of course, we're investing in some marketing that's more paid, but referral and word of mouth has not changed. That's always going to be the way that we, impact the most clients, I think.
Yeah, for sure.
I love that you say that because, back in the day, when I owned fitness studios, it was kind of the same thing, right? Mm-hmm. Like, yes, you have to do some marketing, but at the end of the day, people are coming to you because of the wonderful, kind things that people are saying about your services. Yeah. And I assume dealing with a little bit higher end, you might typically be dealing with a little bit older segment of the population that potentially, not to say that you're not catering to all people of all ages, but maybe people that aren't on Instagram, that aren't, looking you up on Facebook, but are really talking to those friends at those social events that are like, oh man, this trip was amazing.
Yeah. You'd be surprised. We've got, to your point, we have all ages. The majority of our travelers are on the younger side.
Really?
It's an interesting thing, kind of the millennial generation or so that is very addicted to, we call it the I know a guy behavior, right? Like they pick up, they're like, wait, I know a guy for that. I know someone that can do this for me. I know, we love outsourcing everything, call an Uber, do it, whatever. So I think just having a travel advisor in their Rolodex, to use a very outdated term, is something that all ages have started appreciating.
Yeah, no, that makes sense, right? Like that's what the age they live in, where there was no Uber when we wanted.
Yeah, travel is so accessible now. You know what I mean? I don't know. When I was a kid, we did so many road trips. We didn't do big giant vacations and things like that. And so my kids have been able to, grow up and do Hawaii and stuff like that. We didn't do that stuff until I was in my late teens, early 20s. Yeah. And ours were camping trips and things like that. But now it's just, they see so much more of the world. They see these places and they want to go and they make it happen.
Yeah. It's so special. But with that accessibility also comes, I think, and Lori made the point earlier, overwhelm. There's almost too much information. You can get to anywhere. Just, you might want to make sure you're going to the right airport when you're flying into that place. There's just too much to learn on your own if this is not your full-time job.
There's easier ways, or there's more ways to make mistakes. I recall an opportunity that we were going on a trip and I misspelled my husband's name.
Oh yeah.
It's
okay. That's a nightmare.
Yeah. It was a pain in the ass to fix.
Yes, correct.
But if I would have had someone else do it, maybe they would have made the mistake, but less likely, right? Just because
they can help you fix it.
One of those. Yeah, exactly.
I think that's one of the biggest things too, is it's kind of like insurance, right? Maybe things are fine until they're not fine. Yeah. And then when they're not fine, having an advocate that's on your side is huge. Yeah. And not just that, it's not just that one individual. You've got the power of their entire network. And then for us with a team of 80, you've got our agency that's constantly pouring into them professionally and personally and making sure that we are showing up as the best humans who are able to relate to our clients from an empathetic level and from an authority level. So you've got a real well-rounded, wonderful human who's your advocate. And that's really important.
Yeah, that's
for
awesome.
Sure. We had the one cruise I did, it was years and years ago. So it was before 9/11. And it was in the Bahamas and I was supposed to have my birth certificate. I don't think I even needed a passport and I forgot it at home. We were in Florida. My mom had to, it was fax it over, totally ridiculous, but it all worked out and it was fine. Now I can't even imagine them saying, oh yeah, just fax it to us. It'll be good.
Correct. That would definitely not fly this day.
We would not be on that cruise.
And not a whole lot an agent can do in that situation either, right? There's only...
It kind of is what it is, right? Yeah. So Lindsey, let's go back to you being a mom, you being pregnant, your company going through COVID, because, that's for many companies, it crushed them. It crushed mine. In the fitness industry, I could not dig myself out. And I'm very, very interested in how you guys were able to stay afloat, how you were, becoming a new mom and had so much on your plate. Like, how did you do it?
Yeah. Well, something I haven't mentioned to you guys yet is that my husband is my business partner. And so this was a full family affair and family decision.
Yeah.
Also meant all eggs were in one basket. So the panic button looked a lot brighter and redder at the time, right? Of, oh my God, this is our only income. Mm-hmm. And we were actually in the middle of purchasing a home too. We had a home under contract. And so we had to make some very difficult decisions. First of all being, do we keep our home or do we keep our business? Yeah. And we knew when we made that decision of we're going to keep our business, we're doing that because we could see the long-term potential that the industry is going to come back one day. Mm-hmm. Now it's a game of chicken. Can we outlast with what we have in our savings to actually come back stronger? And so that was our goal and our mission. And every day it was such a battle, right? And we had a couple of months before our daughter got here, and then our daughter gets here, and then you've got relentless further months that are happening after to kind of keep re-upping and making that decision of, all right, we believe in what an entrepreneurial lifestyle will do for our family. We believe in this company and these people for this company so much that we know when we get on the other side and we are stronger, this is going to do things that we've never even imagined. And that's actually what panned out. We wound up with an acquisition opportunity where we acquired another company. We were able to grow organically because individuals saw not only us keeping our lights on, but we were putting out positive messaging. We were putting out being a beacon. That was our mission during this time. So we attracted, I think, the right individuals to us, not just from a client perspective, but from team members as well, because of the mission that we decided to stay true with.
So you had a North Star and you just followed it.
Yeah.
I love that because there's so many things that can distract you and the panic is real, right? And I did read that your husband is your business partner. And that was one of the things I wanted to ask you. How do you not kill each other?
Yeah,
right?
how do you not? Because I don't even know. I kind of worked with my husband before and I was like,
most people have that reaction. So I would say you guys are the normal ones. Maybe we're not. We actually started working together the week that we got married. We decided let's be young and dumb and not know any better. So if that shows you the kind of decision makers we are, I don't know if that's helpful or not, but no, we really thought through it because I was like, well, this could tank everything, right? Like working together could wreck both the business and our personal lives. And so it has been a really intentional journey. And I would say the two of us we're over communicators in the way that we talk with one another. And there were really trying times, especially during that time of hardship. Like nothing will show you your own flaws and your partner's flaws like a time of hardship, right? Like success can cover up a lot of a lot of stupid decisions, but hardship will show you when you're making them. Mm-hmm. So I think that was actually the best thing that could have happened to us though, because it really taught us what our lanes were and how we can respect what each of us brings to the table. And we noticed this is true of marriage and of parenting and of business partnership, but the times that I was at a 10%, he was at a 90. So we're making 100, right? We're never 50-50. The times that I am at a 90, he's usually at a 10. So we're able to really step in and lift up one another. Mm-hmm. And that partnership has been just a really, really beautiful thing since we've learned that cadence of professional respect.
I think that's huge. I think about that even with the kids, if I'm freaking out over something or like I start to panic or my temper flares and my husband's chill, right? And if he's panicking, then it's almost like, I have to be there.
Somebody has to trade, right?
Yeah. I mean, someone has to be the adult today.
Exactly.
Somebody's got to keep their shit together because the other person has to.
Yeah. God bless my husband. It's usually him. It sounds a lot like you, Jenny. Like my husband is very stable. Yeah. Doesn't get emotional. Doesn't get riled up. Me, on the other hand.
Well, and then when my husband does get fired up, I'm like, holy shit, something must be wrong.
Yeah. And now I need to behave.
Yeah, exactly.
So COVID happens. You're getting through it. Obviously, the light at the end of the tunnel. You start to see it as we come out of COVID. And now I can only imagine that you guys are just thriving. I mean, everybody wants to travel, right? Like, I mean, the industry is now probably better than it's ever been. I mean, how nice is it to sit back and say, thank God? Take a breath, right?
Right. Well, and what's interesting is I would say it's a breath of relief in that, yay, we survived and now we're thriving. It is not a breath of relaxation, that's for sure, because now you've got the issue of supply and demand, right? Way more demand than there is supply, both in terms of talent and the travel advisor side, as well as actual inventory. Like so many people are traveling. We're talking about hotels getting booked up very far in advance and or just commanding the highest rates we've ever seen, and they're sticking to them. So the travel industry these days looks like a totally different landscape. And that's why professionals are there to navigate that.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. It's like you finish one challenge and you get more, right? Like it's life.
Yes. It's a large reason that we launched a podcast this year called Who Made You the Boss? And the thought would be, well, shouldn't that be about travel, right? Like you're a travel agency. And we decided, no, we pour so much into personal and professional development that we want to have conversations outside of the travel industry to make it more known that travel agents even exist, because that is such a huge part of the travel agent world. Most people think that the industry went under because of the internet, right? And it's actually more viable and thriving than it ever has been before, thanks to COVID.
Yeah. And when the older I get, like the busier I am, I need somebody to lean on for that stuff, you know? And so it's funny, like you go through this phase, I think when you're younger and you're like, I can plan it all myself. And now I'm like, I know Lori, you love it, but I'm like, I just don't have the energy to do it. And to your point, I'm like, if I could make a pretty big mistake and then, I mean, you figure it out, right? But it could ruin your whole experience.
Like spell your husband's name wrong? No.
Yeah.
There is a lot at stake. I find that more in life too. The older that I get, and I think motherhood has taught me this a lot, the more I'm learning to kind of loosen my grip on control. Yeah. And whether that is delegating a professional service or as an entrepreneur, if that's delegating tasks that I otherwise was becoming the bottleneck on, or even in terms of childcare and in help with my family, right? I have 2 little girls now and I'm running a business. I'm the host of a podcast. I want to be able to breathe at some point. Like there are points where you have to make those decisions of, all right, what does this look like in my life right now? Because I can't be a full-time stay-at-home mom like my mom was. So what does that need to look like to where I still am able to pour into my kids and be the role that no one else can replace, which is mom, but also model for them that you can pursue your dreams and you can make an impact as a woman and as a mother. So it's really important, I think, to, as we're talking about like delegating travel, like that's just one little thing that could be taking you away from your family and from your most important role.
Yeah. And if it's not something you love, like if you love it, do it. That's great. If it gives you energy, but there's certain things I'm like, I don't love that. And I'm okay handing that off.
Yeah.
But, we're talking about delegation. So it weaves perfectly into how do you take care of yourself? So obviously like you're pulled at all different directions. I mean, you've got littles. So I don't know. Did we already say how old your kiddos are? We said it before.
If we didn't, I have a 3.5-year-old and my little baby will be 1 this week. And I don't know when we're recording, but it is out of the newborn phase and about to enter into the toddler years again.
Yes. Yes. So, I mean, how do you care for yourself and how do you take that time to make sure that you guys can recover from the crazy?
Yeah, I do really think self-care is so important. And this is something that I learned the first time around. I actually had a pretty wild experience the first time around where I struggled a lot with postpartum. I wound up on a medication and that medication actually caused a seizure. And for 6 months, I could not drive. So I had an 18-month-old without the ability to drive. We didn't have childcare at that point. I mean, we had family, thankfully, that helped. But, I learned during a season of just relentless being on, because then that caused more problems, right? That caused more depression, that caused more issues, that you have got to take the time to step back and care for yourself, that you cannot let that suffer, because then you can't be a great mother. And I certainly couldn't be a great mother. I certainly couldn't be a great leader during that time because I was trying to recover from everything. And I had no way to escape, right? I couldn't even drive myself somewhere. Yeah. So I learned a lot of important lessons on how to show up, how to have hope in spite of the outcome, and what kind of a good daily routine looks like. And so for me, I'm a big believer in yoga, prayer, meditation, all of the, the mindfulness journey that is self-help, but also in finding like, what is your unique strength and what really brings you to life? And so for me, it's creating. I am a creative through and through. It's why I launched a business, because I was able to create something from nothing. I like creating jobs from nothing, stimulating the economy in that way. But I also love writing. I love speaking. I love all of the things that go along with that creative muscle. And for a long time, I had been really pulled into the weeds of my business. And that was just sucking me dry, right? So I wasn't able to spend time creating. And luckily with Jeremy coming in, he now sits as our COO. He's he's running the day-to-day, that frees me up to do these creative endeavors, like launching the podcast, like putting more work into the world about our professional identities. That's a really important topic to me. So I find now a much more, and I think balance is a total myth, right? But a much more balanced life. I'll use it in that way. A much more balanced life because if I do have time to myself, I'm hyper specific about using that time to create, which is where it really brings me to life.
So Lindsey, I was going to ask real quick, sorry to interrupt, Jenny, but so are you a very scheduled person? It sounds like you're very you obviously being very busy. I mean, do you kind of, talking about your creativity and doing a podcast, I mean, are those just kind of stacked in your day, or are you more like, oh, I'll fit it in when I can? But you seem like you're very scheduled.
Yeah, I think you have to schedule personally, because if you try to just fit it in, it will fall to the wayside. No, I don't schedule every minute of that creativity. This minute, I need to be thinking about this topic. I'll schedule like a 2-hour time block. I've found that my brain works best if I have a nice 2-hour chunk of this is what I'm going to be using to create, to pursue that creative endeavor. And then a little bit of more of a flow state can happen. Mm-hmm. But absolutely, I'm probably... Yeah, I'm a little bit of a maniac when it comes to a schedule.
Giving yourself that time, though, to dedicate.
Yeah.
Well, and I saw something, too, that are you working on a book?
Yes. Yeah. That was really where a lot of this started. I started writing during the pandemic because it's something that I always had inside of me. And I felt like it's just going to claw its way out if I don't actually let it out. So let's not let this destroy me. Let me let it out. Yeah. And I actually have an agent who is pushing that to publishers as we speak, which is exciting. So we'll see. I've heard that if you want to experience rejection, you should write a book. Like this is going to be a journey. I know. But I've had some green lights so far, which is really exciting.
That's awesome. What's the book about?
It's about the illusion of control. It's about that kind of 18-month period of going from, the loss of what I thought was my identity because I was on an upward trajectory of success and I tied my self-worth to that. And what that means when we lose it because of our business failing or because of becoming a mom or because of falling out of your kitchen table in a seizure, right? Like all the things that we just have no idea is in store for us. And for me, it just happened during like a condensed amount of time. Yeah. And I'm just such a big believer because during that time, even during the darkest moments, again, it was a lot of help from my husband and my therapist, but holding on to hope in spite of the outcome to know that we can actually use those obstacles as our opportunities. And now I sit on the other side of a lot of that storyline. Of course, life is still evolving and anything can happen, but we quadrupled because of that growth. We got some big awards because of that growth. Like we've now been able to see what that looks like both personally and professionally. And I think that's a really inspiring message that I want other people to know.
Absolutely. You also mentioned imposter syndrome. And it's so funny. I have a group text with a bunch, I do human resources, and there's a group of us that have been on a text string for like 10 years and we share ideas and ask questions. And one of them sent, do you guys ever have imposter syndrome? And I was like, every fucking day. Are you kidding me? And starting my own business, talk about like what you said, if you want to feel failure, like if you want to try to overcome that or strengthen that muscle, start a business.
Yep, pretty much.
So tell us a little bit more about the imposter syndrome work that you do.
So this is literally the reason that I named the podcast, Who Made You the Boss? This is the question that I look in the mirror with my shirt on backwards and I'm like, who's listening to me? Like, who did this? Because I feel like we all struggle with it. I'm so grateful that you guys admit it too. And I think when asked pointedly, we're willing to admit it, but a lot of times we're not raising the topic in advance. And I think it's really important to kind of raise our hands and say to others, hey, this is normal. Here are ways to get out of it. And actually, the more successful you become, the more you'll probably experience this. Because every day you're going to wake up and hopefully your company's growing and you're going to own a company that's a little bit bigger than it was the day before. And you haven't ran a company that size. So you're probably going to have the moment where someone's like, well, who the hell are you to do it? So I think it's really important that we just acknowledge that. That is what I talk about so much on my podcast and on my social media, because I saw this within my team, right? Like I have a team of wonderful individuals who serve on our leadership team. And then the rest of the team is travel advisors. Mm-hmm. And most of them are their own business owners. And so we were seeing this kind of time and time again where, I don't really want to charge for my service because it's really scary and it's like, well, wait a minute. There's a whole bunch of psychological stuff we've got to unpack here between what you're tying your self-worth to your service and what's telling you are not worth it. Just so much that we struggle with. It just made it abundantly clear that this is probably something we all go through, whether we're entrepreneurs or we're service-based professionals or we're simply a human.
Moms, right?
As moms,
Yeah.
gosh, who knows how to raise these kids?
Who gave me this child?
Who gave me this
To take care of
I'm not
it.
equipped.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I love that. And the pricing thing, my business partner, we started an HR consultancy a year ago, and we have decided that our biggest challenge is actually pricing accordingly, because we struggle every time. We're like, is it going to get any easier? Is it going to get any easier?
Yeah.
So yeah, that's tough.
I think so. I had a really terrible boss, so I don't like to credit him for this, but he used to say, don't apologize for making a profit. And for whatever reason, out of all the horrible things he would say, like he was like a very abusive man, like not a good human.
Yeah.
Out of all the horrible things he would say, for some reason, that one though, sometimes is encouraging, where I remember that like, well, don't apologize for making a profit. Like you've got to be able to price accordingly to keep up with demand and to actually, make this a viable business. But I think especially as women, we really get in our heads about that.
Yeah.
And believing in what we do and believing in ourselves and our capabilities, right? I think a lot of the time too, like even looking back at the fitness industry, you see, you're trying to stay on par to what everybody else is charging. And at the end of the day, you're like, but I'm better. We're just better. So we should charge more. But you struggle with that, right?
Yes.
Because there's like, well, are people still going to come? Yeah, they're still going to come because they
right
love
people
you.
will. Yeah.
Good for you for finding the confidence to say I'm better, right? That alone is something that
I know.
Right. And we were better.
Yes. But if you're growing, you're going to bump up against that. I'm not equipped to do this. Your point about giving credit to that boss. I don't know if either of you watched the Oscars, but Billie Eilish won an Oscar, and she credited her choir teachers. And she credited one of them. She's like, "You were such a great teacher. Thank you so much." And then she said about the other one, she goes, whatever the name was, and she's like, "You didn't like me, but you were a really good teacher." And I just thought that was so interesting.
That's such a good burn.
Sometimes assholes can teach you the best lessons.
Yeah. It's the school of hard knocks. I think it's really important.
Right.
Yeah. So it's just cute.
So Lindsey, I do have a question. So working with your husband, I go back to this because I'm fascinated, right? That can work with your husband. So how do you guys disconnect and have a relationship like separate from work, or do you how do you how do you go out to dinner and not let work consume your conversations? Or maybe you can't, I don't know.
No, it is a constant act of holding that tension. And sometimes it's okay over dinner to talk about work. We try not to do it when the kids are around. I think what's really important, something that's helped us, here's a tip that if anyone else works with their partner, you can implement this now. It's really important to figure out, so we call them home Lindsey and work Lindsey, home Jeremy and work Jeremy, right? Like these are actually 4 different people. These are home Lindsey and work Lindsey are not the same person. And so very quickly we realized that like work Lindsey and work Jeremy are not disgustingly in love like home Lindsey and home Jeremy are. And so how do they show up and navigate the world together? And so when we're talking about things at dinner, there are times where we have to actually say, and we don't call him home Lindsey, we actually call him wife Lindsey and husband Jeremy, right? Like these are the real titles. Yeah. And there are times where we have to say like, okay, do I need the work version of you to show up, or do I need my husband version of you to show up to this conversation? And we sound probably like psychopaths if you're like listening in on this conversation. But it actually works. Yes. It's over communicating to say, this is what I need right now. I just need to vent. I don't need you to solve this as my business partner. Like I just need to tell you why I'm really annoyed that this customer said this, whatever that looks like. Yeah. But if we don't identify that at the beginning of the conversation, then it does become kind of like a toxic swirl of this is all our lives have become. It's just work conversation, right? Like it's important, I think, to draw those lines.
Yeah. And I like your approach. I've heard the tactic of, if you're on date night, don't talk about work, don't talk about the kids. I'm like, but I don't feel like that's realistic. Like you're talking, it's scripted. Like you're talking about whatever's going on in life. But I do think that it's important to say, here's what I need from you right now. Mm-hmm. And it sounds like you guys have done a really good job of that.
Right. Thanks. Yeah. I mean, it's a daily learning, right? Please don't think that we've got it down to a science, but this has at least been
So traveling yourself. So you spend all of your days helping people travel. What about you? Do you get to actually go and do a fair amount of traveling now? Obviously, it sounds like you meet a lot with your partners, which is great. Building relationships. So I can assume that kind of lends, you getting to travel a little bit?
Yeah, it was. So it's interesting. So I was a frontline travel advisor for about 10 years. And that's like the real sweet spot career move, right? Like that is when all the hotels and destinations want you to come because you're selling to the clients and they want you to see it to be able to say, oh, I have a client for this. I know the perfect person. As an owner now, as I sit in the CEO role and we focus on the business and on scaling the business, we see a lot of the inside of conference rooms. So it's way less sexy.
Yeah.
But from a personal standpoint, I really try to, I don't travel nearly as much. And I think that's because of the season of life that I'm in. But I try to take opportunities where I can pour back into myself. So that question you asked earlier, earlier this year, I went to Miraval in the Berkshires, which is a wellness resort that has 3 different locations. Yes, it sounds like you're familiar.
I might have to hit you up. That's on my bucket list.
Jenny's like, plan it for me.
Yes, it was fun. I learned so much. I'm a lover of learning. I didn't expect to go and just learn so much. And then you can also just go and turn off. That's fine too. But for me, I needed that pouring into. So that was really special. And then we are really making a concerted effort to travel as a family. So we're actually spending, this is wild. I feel it was wild to still say, we're spending the entire summer in Europe. So June in Spain, July in Portugal. So we are really trying to make that a regular cadence to our lives and to our children's lives.
And it will only make you better at what you do because then you've seen it, you've done it, you've experienced it.
Yes.
What's your favorite trip that you've ever taken?
I love this question. My all-time favorite trip is South Africa.
Ooh.
And I love this question because then earlier, you were talking about a lot of the moms listening tend to be a little bit more adventurous or maybe even active. I am not that mom. I am not outdoorsy. I have never been an adventurous individual. I'm take me on a food tour. That's my favorite thing to do, but definitely don't put me in paragliding situation.
Yeah.
South Africa, where you're in the bush and you are waking up at the crack of dawn to go see animals. That did not sound like my dream trip.
Yeah.
It was life-changing. And I've now gone a couple of times. It is just the most magical place on earth to me.
How did it come up? How did you have the opportunity to go there? Like you said, you weren't the one to maybe seek it out. So how did it kind of?
This was God and the universe, right? I won. It was a business card drawing from a festival. So one of those, I've never won anything in my life before or after. I think this was really, really God's work. They pulled my business card out of a drawing at a travel event and I won a really cool trip to South Africa.
I'm ordering my business cards.
I know, right? You need to keep business cards right there.
I love it. That's amazing.
The travel industry does have
heard anybody win something like that from that.
Well, you know what's so wild though is that as a travel advisor, that's so normal. I don't want to sell the job as all you do is travel because it's really hard, important work. Most of the work is done behind the computer. It's for individuals who love serving other people. Yeah. But the perk that is getting to go test out the product is pretty nice.
Yeah, no kidding. Oh my gosh. How many years ago was that you went?
Oh gosh, it's probably been 8 years since my most recent trip to South Africa. Now, Jeremy and I honeymooned in Kenya and Tanzania. So we've done other parts of Africa since. But South just kind of has my heart.
So next is bungee jumping, skydiving,
That's so adventurous.
Yeah, I'm learning to be more adventurous.
We went to I don't know if you've even heard of it, but Gimmelwald is this tiny little village in Switzerland above Interlaken. Yeah. And I went years ago and I took my husband this past fall and I was like, you have to see this place. It's magical. And the good and the bad, right? I took him, we toured around, all that kind of stuff. But when we got there, we found it's one of the outdoor meccas. It's the adventure mecca of, I don't know, Europe, Switzerland, whatever. So there's skydiving, there's paragliding, there's, canyoneering, all these really cool things. And we wanted to do them all. Yeah. They were all completely booked. So here is a little shout out to if I had called you, you would have been like, you know what, you got to get on that shit early. Yeah. And we would have been able to do it all. So now I'm I would love to go back, but there's so many places I want to see. I need to maximize every single place I go.
Totally. That's so true. It's true. I do think it's fun to know those little nuances though, too. Yeah. And that's one of the fun things about working with an advisor is it's 90% therapy where you get to kind of tell them this is what I love and this is what I want to make sure happens. And they'll be able to pull out facts like that too. I think about if I know someone is adventurous and I actually did do this. So I'm proud to say I did it because it was part of the experience. But We know about the hotel in Oman that you have to paraglide into as part of the arrival experience, right? Like if you love adventure, then let's send you there. And some people might be like, well, no, thank you. I don't want to go that far. And so let's find something that's closer to your needs. So it's just a matter of all of those little nuances and customizing. But you're right. Like the advisors are going to know that the nuances of what you need to do ahead of time so that you don't get there and have a disappointing trip.
Yeah.
So let's talk about your advisors. How do you get them dialed in? I mean, it sounds like they're probably constant researchers, right? I mean, how are they getting the background and the knowledge? Is it them really putting in the work online to dig all this information up?
Yeah, it's kind of maybe 2 or 3-fold. So let's think about this. One, they are doing a lot of work themselves. We are often inviting our supplier partners in to have conversations, to tell us, to educate us, and the advisors are investing in themselves by going on trips that actually familiarize themselves with the destination. So they're constantly doing that work. But what's really important about what Jetset is that we're a generalist travel agency. And so that means all of our 80 plus advisors are specialists in their clients. And then we have contacts all around the world for that particular destination. So we get to know what the client needs are, and then we can better say, ooh, I wonder if they've actually even thought about doing South Africa. And so even if they haven't, I know what their nuances are, what their preferences are. I'm going to take it to my friend who I know plans this really well, that's based in destination, that we work with as a travel agency on a regular basis. We're going to put together a customized itinerary with their on-the-ground contacts, and my contact being them. And now we're going to bring it to life. So a lot of it is their knowledge, but I think as a generalist, you cannot know everything about the world. That would be highly unrealistic. So you call on that network, which is really powerful.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
This is how it should be. And I think that's why Lori and I really wanted to do this, is because we believe in collaboration and partnerships and the network. And I don't say network like networking, but the network and the power of all of us together making something amazing happen.
Mm-hmm. I totally agree.
That's awesome. So we always like to ask, a couple fun questions. So what you're working on now is your book. So I have another question. Along with the book, do you foresee yourself doing another book, or is this like I checked it off, I'm done, or has it been such a fun process that you're like, I want to do another one?
No, I think I'm a little bit addicted at this point. I think I am a writer. English was my major. I'm a writer by my first love, right? Like that is what I love doing. And so if I can find what people need to read, I'm happy to be the vessel to write those things.
Awesome. I love that. I used to love to write. Now I feel like it's one of those things that I need to like rekindle it. Right.
Yeah. The Artist's Way. I highly recommend The Artist's Way.
What is it called?
The Artist's Way. Have you guys seen that by Julia Cameron?
You know what? I've heard of it and people keep recommending it to me. And maybe this is like the billionth time. I just need to buy the fucking thing.
You don't have to even be a writer. I think that it's very applicable as an entrepreneur, as any sort of creative. If you have even thought, I'm kind of creative, it's a very helpful way to pull that out of you.
Thank you. All right. Mm-hmm. I'm sold.
Yeah. And just to follow that up, like, what are you most excited for?
Probably the launch of this podcast. I launched in January. I've mentioned it a couple of times. While I've been working on the book, the podcast was kind of like an idea of how can I tie my professional self, Lindsey, CEO at Jetset, to my personal writing and love for speaking on, all the little gremlins that get in our head as professionals. Yeah. And so the result of that was this podcast. And I didn't expect to fall in love with podcasting in the way that I have. So I would say I'm most excited about that because it's a nice representation of all the work that I feel I'm on the planet to do and what Jetset is doing really well on a day-to-day basis when it comes to professional development. So it's kind of a fun intersection.
Yeah, it's such a great way to get your voice heard, and for us to get other people's voices heard is really what's so fun about it. Is Jenny and I always say everyone has a story, and we love sharing it. And we just hope that if you can't relate specifically with one of our guests, we know that everybody will enjoy hearing their journey, which I think is so important.
You get to meet really cool people, right? That you otherwise would have never been in contact with.
And you said you're a learner. I think we're both learners too. We're just naturally curious. And I always joke, my grandma used to get so annoyed. I'd ask a billion questions before like 7 a.m. Right. And she's like, why do you have to ask so many questions? I'm like, well, I guess this is my time. This is my time to ask all the questions.
You're curious, right? And
I love being an annoying morning person. I love a good morning conversation. We can hang, Jenny.
Totally.
I think we're all morning people. I mean, I'm a morning person too.
Yeah.
And my husband is not. And I'm just like, and my kids are not. And I'm just like, does somebody else want to get up and just be in a good mood? Like, can
I
this?
do.
Oh, good. Okay. Well,
So you got a
I am
dog.
also the only one in my household.
right. Awesome.
My dogs are always they're morning dogs. They wake you up and they're like, let's go.
Right. Well, I do have a puppy. And so she's very like, wakes up early. And then, now she's taking a nap because that's what puppies do. They wake up, go crazy. And then they're like, all right, it's 9:30. I'm going to go back to bed. Lindsey, it has been such a pleasure having you on the show. I'm so excited to introduce our listeners to your company. I myself, will check it out because we are always traveling. And although I really, really love, doing the planning, I see such a value in having someone else do it for me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
thanks.
And how do we find you? Tell us really quickly, like, how do we find you? And we'll share all your links and all the things.
Thanks. We would love that. Yeah. If you're interested in having Jetset plan a trip, super easy. It's jetsetworldtravel.com. And there's a tab in the right-hand corner that says request a trip. And that is where you start. You can tell us all about that dream trip in the back of your head. You'll get matched to an advisor and we can go from there. For me personally, I love nowadays having these conversations about what we've talked about today, right? Imposter syndrome and scaling a business and how do we not let the gremlins get the best of us professionally. So connect with me by following on Who Made You the Boss if you're a podcast fan, which obviously you are because you're listening today. But also just on Instagram at Lindsey Epperly. I love meeting new people.
Awesome.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much. And I'm sure we'll have you back on the show here soon, and you can tell us about some more amazing trips that you did about skydiving and all the things.
I will keep an idea of all the Europe stuff for you guys after we've been there.
Yeah. I think you should do a whole like Instagram journey, taking everybody through your whole summer. I think that'd be amazing.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
Starting with the plane ride.
Yeah, there you go. Oh my God. The meltdowns, like you could get all the things.
Yeah.
I'm happy to show the real side.
Yeah, I can't wait to hear all about it. And we'll be following your book. And yes, we'd love to have you back anytime.
Thank you guys.
Thank you, Lindsey. Thanks for listening. And until next time, keep being you and keep being badass.